core, we haven't really talked about the mystery itself is actually surrounding a counterfeiting scam, basically. And so there's some guy who figured out the secret, basically, to printing a whole bunch of dollars. And that is, of course, a crime if you are a private citizen, but it is apparently not, it's like a Tuesday if you are the federal government and the Fed. So,
yep.
Also, it's, by the way, just so we are clear, it is a complete mystery why inflation has happened and nobody has any idea.
It's corporate greed, Sean.
It's probably corporate greed. Nobody could possibly know why inflation is 7.5. Oh, sorry, 8. Oh, sorry, 9. Oh, sorry, 10%, whatever it is now. Like, Paul, you've been doing updates to a meme this whole year.
Oh my gosh.
It's like depressing. It's so
depressing.
Where did we start? I think the meme started at like when you get a 3% raise and it's 5% inflation, and now we're like 7.5.
Yeah. Yeah. And every time the comments are the same. Well, that's not even the real inflation number.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
I get it. But yeah, I mean, like money printers going burr.
Yeah. Well, and the Fed just like yesterday or whenever, a couple days ago, well, maybe not yesterday, but whenever, was like surprised by this. They're like, we don't really understand. We said it was going to be transitory, and it seems to be continuing, and we don't really understand why. What? How do you have your job?
They didn't watch Common Sense Soapbox.
Yeah.
They needed to watch that first.
They did.
They really should have. My children have a better sense of why inflation happens than apparently professional economists, and that is very upsetting.
It is.
Makes professional economists look really good, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I get pretty frustrated that, like, there are a lot of decent economists out there, and but it's too easy especially with, I mean, obviously, like the profession is a lot of times very heavily tied into government and into politics, but also, like, it's very easy with like certain schools of economics. And, we could be talking about the modern monetary theory people, but they're like, even within the economics profession, they're rightly viewed as basically insane. But, like, you still have Keynesians, much more sort of standard schools, London School, anything that's sort of Keynesian based, which is very common, and
oh yeah,
and they still offer inflation as a solution to most, economic problems. I mean, and this has been sort of the law of the land in the United States for, 25 years or more. I mean, maybe 30 years at this point, which is like, anytime there's any kind of economic downturn, the federal government and the Fed's and the Federal Reserve's response has been, well, let's just print a ton of money and, do some stimulus programs and send people checks and buy new roads and whatever else. Like, we're just going to throw a bunch of cash around, and throwing that cash around is going to allow, the economy to sort of get back on track, because the whole thing for them is what Keynesians talk about as aggregate demand, right? Like, that's the whole basis of their understanding of what's good and bad in terms of an economy, and when aggregate demand falls, that's a depression waiting to happen. So we have to boost that demand. And the only way they can do it is by throwing cash into the system. But there's a consequence to that. But it's such an obvious consequence. That it's what I don't get about it is, like, it's such a blatantly obvious result.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the difference here this time, I mean, we've had inflation, but it's been a relatively, everyone can kind of stomach it. It hasn't really
sort
affected.
Of slow,
Yeah, slow. But the problem this time is that then we shut down every mode of production.
Yeah.
So now we have fewer goods that are being chased with more dollars that have all of a sudden just poofed out of nowhere.
So let's be super clear about this, because inflation, when we talk about price increases as a result of inflation, is fundamentally about the gap between the stuff available and the amount of money that is available to chase the stuff. So like you can get higher prices by, either direction, right? Like you can suddenly have a reduction in supply. Let's say a hurricane knocks out the supplier of, this happened to us, a couple years ago, where there was a pipeline that broke and then gas prices went way up in Atlanta because the pipeline that serves us in Atlanta was no longer functioning. And so there was a lot less supply. And so there was the same dollars chasing the same amount of gas. There's the same dollars in the system, but there was a lot less gas. So gas prices went up, right? Or you can print a lot more dollars. You have the same amount of stuff. And then now there's more dollars for the same stuff. So you can pay more dollars for the stuff. Now, as Paul just said, we have the dual problem of less stuff and more dollars simultaneously, which is just, again, incredibly predictable, but like horrifying, because we normally haven't had both of those things simultaneously. Like normally we've had inflationary policies, but like still a pretty consistent production of goods and services, And
I think what hurts the most for this one is that this was all a choice.
Yeah. This is self-inflicted.
Like I went to the grocery store yesterday, y'all, and
you had to spell a spleen.
Like it was real bad. I've had over a year now to adjust to a difference in availability in the kind of food products that I like to buy in the grocery store. Just there's not as many people here in the Mountain West, and the diversity is not nearly so broad as it was outside of Atlanta. So the variety of goods available is just not as broad, and I've gotten used to that. However, even given that, what is actually available at my local grocery store, and this is not like a mom and pop thing. This is Smith's, which is basically Kroger. It is the largest grocery chain in the United States. Like I could not find heavy cream. Milk, the store brand milk is like $4 a gallon. It's really, really frustrating to go to the store and not even be able to find basic staples. And if you do find them, they're like twice as expensive as you remember them being, just like last month. And it was preventable. All of this was 100% preventable. My family is managing, but we're very, very fortunate to be managing. And not everybody is like upper middle class. So
yeah,
I get the frustration.
I found that to be one of the more like offensive things at the kind of mid pandemic, like 2020 and like early 2021, where we would see, and I would see, I mean, we would all see this, like you'd go to the grocery store and you would see, item limits on stuff, or you would see like barren shelves for certain kinds of things. And then you would see photos of that. And then you would see in the comments a whole bunch of people saying stuff like, well, there's still meat there, or there's still whatever it is there. It's just, it's like, it's not what you wanted, right? So you're still going to get something, But what that always assumed was that they were shopping at one of the stores that could command higher prices for stuff. And so they could actually get suppliers to bring them stuff. What they were not factoring in is the stores that serve more poorer areas, and not just in the United States. I think that's probably the more important thing, is like most of the places outside of the United States where there's just literally nothing there. Not like I went in for sirloin and ended up with, chuck or something like that, right? Like I went in for meat of any kind, and it is not there. It is literally not there because Americans who have access to a Whole Foods got it, and did not, it did not end up in a place like Margrave, Georgia, for example, in the show, or even worse, in a place like Mexico City or something like that. Like, you miss those pieces of all of this because it's so easy to be in that bubble of just like, well, look, it's inconveniencing that I had to wait a week to get flour, but like I could still get it eventually and it was fine. Well, there are a lot of people around the world for whom like that immediacy is that it matters, right? Like the fact that they couldn't get the food that day made a big difference. They didn't just have a freezer full of stuff that they could rely on for a couple weeks until things got a little bit back to, back in order. But I don't know. I've often been sort of offended by the way that people talk about that stuff dismissively, like it's not that big of a deal.